Welcome to our Simple Healthy Life podcast, where our goal is to have real, insightful conversations on topics that we find interesting. And more, it's been fun for us because we get to have them with people that we find interesting. Mm-hmm. And today we have Julie Foster. She has a master's in mental health counseling, and she is a certified life coach and a certified grief relief specialist.
Grief recovery specialist.
So I was lucky enough to meet Julie at a place that, as our listeners know, is very important to me, a place called JPH, where she runs a lot of grief programs for them.
Yes.
And Julie is somebody that I found interesting because she started on her path and, going through the education system and going through the clinical system with the masters and working through mental health counseling, but then truly discovered her passion and outside of maybe the traditional route. So welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I know we're super glad you're here.
Super excited.
So the topic of grief is a topic that I would traditionally run from, to be perfectly honest with everybody. But to have someone like yourself here to kind of talk through it and answer some questions for us is super interesting to me. So why don't we start with a little bit about you?
Okay. Yeah, grief is something most people want to run from. Unless someone is really struggling, then they're like, help me. So what you said is correct. I was a mental health counselor for 10 years. I have a natural desire to help people, and this journey has been, how do I best help people and take care of myself? And I think you're right about grief. Helping people with grief is my passion. I'm very passionate about it, and that only comes from my own grief experience and not doing it well.
Can you explain? This is so that when we first met, you kind of started to tell me the story, and I actually asked you to stop telling me because I wanted to hear it for the first time right now. So can you tell us the story of what sparked or your Kairos moment around grief?
Yes, Kairos. So my mother was diagnosed with glioblastoma in 2017. That's a deadly brain cancer. So my husband and I quit my job. My husband and I moved into her basement, my parents' basement, and I became her caretaker for a year. We were all her caretakers, but I was just the one with her all the time. And that time was so special, and I would never change a moment of it. Very lucky, and I know it, to be able to do that financially, emotionally. So she passed in 2018, exactly 1 year from her diagnosis. And the entire year I was like, well, there was this anticipatory grief. No, she was terminal from diagnosis. So I was always like, well, I'll just know how to grieve because I'm a therapist. Right. So of course I know how to grieve. And then as soon as she was gone, I was like, oh, shit. I don't know how to do this at all. There is no book about this. Well, there's probably many, but there's no guide. There's no conversation. And so, of course, my natural instinct was, okay, I'll just focus on everybody else. How is my brother doing? How's my sister doing? What are we going to do with my father? How are they? I need to find them support. And I did. And then it was on to my husband's business. I'll focus on that. I'll run it. And I did actually do a great job. Made us pretty successful. Nice. But I was not paying attention to my own grief. Not at all. Totally blocking it out. And then 2 years in, I started to get really sick. I started to... my muscles started giving out on me. So at one point I could not walk up the stairs because my leg muscles were so weak, and then it progressed to I couldn't lift my arms over my head, so I couldn't shower or shampoo my hair, and then it started to move to my swallowing muscles, so then I was not able to swallow solid food for about 9 months, And all this time I was going to doctors like, something's wrong, something's wrong. And there were so many symptoms that I went to every doctor possible, every test possible. And eventually we did get to a diagnosis, an autoimmune disorder, through a simple blood test. But, and the treatment, it's called dermatomyositis. And so derma sort of affects your skin and then your muscles. Basically, your immune system is like attacking your muscles and your skin and your joints. But regardless of that, I did the treatment that they offered, which was a chemo drug. But I truly started to get better when I looked at my own mental health. And I started to look at, I went to a natural functional doctor.
Sure, yeah.
And changed like my diet, my supplements, my nutrients, started learning what my body actually needed. But it was also because that doctor was encouraging me to think about what my body needed, I started to get in touch with my actual body, like, oh yeah, they're connected. And I started to really think about my feeling. How was I actually feeling?
And that started to, and what happened then? It started to turn?
Yeah, that's when I really started to get better. I definitely had a therapist at that time. And he was so helpful, but I still felt like I needed more. And then I sought out a grief recovery specialist. So a medium actually recommended this person. She was certified in the grief recovery method. And so anything to do with books or studying, I'll nerd out. So I was like, oh, I need to know about this. So I ended up working with her one-on-one. There was a guide, a book called The Grief Recovery Method. And we read it together, and we went through their steps that you go through. You spent 8 weeks with this person, and we dug so deep, and it was painful, but so transformative. It was like my healing process took a left turn in the right direction. So that, and then it helped me so much. I was like, I have to be able to help people in this way. I have to.
Wow.
So that's why I got certified.
Wow. So that's very interesting, because there's then some time that had gone on in between from your mother passing to when you actually recognized, oh, maybe this is grief. I mean, this was
2 years.
2 years. So it was the medium who kind of said, hey, like, you've got grief going on. Because I can imagine, I mean, 2 years, and you're probably like, I'm past this. I mean, that's probably what the thought was. Or was it the thought?
The thought was always, I can handle this. I don't need anybody else to help me with it.
Yeah, so that it's funny. We sometimes have the same train of thought.
Yeah.
My question is, can you remember back when you were in this 2-year period, or specifically that 9 months where your body was shutting down? You know, we know that the majority of our thoughts are repetitive. Can you tell us a little bit about like what that thought pattern was like to be kind of trapped in that experience?
Yes, awesome question, because that was the scariest time in my whole life, that 9 months. When you start to not be able to eat food, your body reacts in a very intense way. And I felt my brain like not being able to think clearly. It was a very dark place, because I truly thought, well, no doctor has figured this out, so I must be dying. I really believed I was dying, not in a dramatic way, in a eventually my body's going to give out way. And I truly I sought out lawyers, started writing a will, telling my husband where all the passwords were, and yeah, I was so serious. And this one list, and it's probably wasn't a good idea, but I wrote a list of all the things I didn't get to do. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And honestly, as I got better, I was like, I have to do that list. I
Nice.
have to. And once I felt well enough, I just like started going down the list. It was go to Sedona, Arizona.
Ooh, going there next month.
Oh, it's so good.
Is it? Oh.
What else? Oh, the Grand Canyon, California. My husband and I just started doing it.
Awesome.
Yeah,
That is so cool.
it was so powerful.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah, but
amazing.
that was a really, really dark place, and that was during COVID, so that was
That's
2020.
Wow.
21.
Easy
So-
to be in a dark place there
And
for everybody.
And I
anyway.
was so scared about my health that I wouldn't let anybody in the house.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
So
and
you
I'm-
isolated on top of this.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
So I have a bunch of questions that are like specific, maybe, but I want to keep going a little bit further on this on you. So you started to make the change mentally, right? And then what came back? Like what you mean? You walk. She, for those of you who can't see, she broke her foot. So
Broke my
she
ankle.
did, but she did walk in here by herself, and her arms appear to be working fine. So you're back to a normal sense of Julie, and that took a
Yes.
little bit of time. But what was that process like?
Yes. So after being diagnosed, that was like, okay, this is real, because every doctor I saw said, maybe you need to do yoga, maybe you need to, eliminate stress, maybe you need to lose weight. And I was like, well, I already lost 40 pounds from not being able to eat food. Like, what else am I supposed to do? So, the healthcare system, probably a whole other podcast that we could get into. But I did take the chemo drug for maybe 6 months. And that did what it was supposed to do, but it also is very toxic. So then it was like, my body's really toxic. I can feel it. And that's actually why we went to Sedona.
Wow.
To kind of get into. I actually saw a shaman out there. I had been working with her remotely, but I went to meet her in person so she could help me get rid of some of the toxins and help me figure out mental and spiritual and physical.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And it was life-changing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. And so, I will want to know more about this just for my own personal gain, but I'll skip that for right this second.
Specifically where?
Who is this?
She's
shaman?
the best. I will give you her info.
Okay, thank you. So, all right. So, the medium kind of says, "Hey, this is
Try
grief,
this."
and
Yeah.
like let's figure this out." And you
Yeah.
reach out to this this grief recovery specialist, and they walk you through this method. What did you learn about your grief at that time?
I learned so much. Great question. One of the steps in the grief recovery method is to create a loss history graph. And that, I think, is the more painful part, because it's like you draw a line across a piece of paper, and you start, day one is your birthday, and, up to current day. And you write every loss that you can think of. And for me, I wrote ages. Sometimes you can write years, but for me, it meant more to write like what age I was at. And so you're looking at it all on one piece of paper in front of you. And then it was like, wow, I've been through a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, this is a lot of trauma.
Right.
And then she looked at it, you share it with this specialist, and she was like, so you were a junior in high school when your uncle died. How did you react to that? Like, she was looking at it from the outside in, and it made me realize that's really when I started drinking to soothe myself. It was like a light bulb went off. And, she asked very specific questions, and now I ask people these questions. What were the messages you were getting from your family? And I was like, well, they were all drinking and eating and, making jokes and making light of it, because that's how they dealt. And I don't mean any disrespect to them. That's probably how they learned to deal with grief. But it just made me think about, it made me go back to that 17-year-old, 16-year-old, and be like, she was hurting and she had nowhere to like put it or talk about it or heal it.
Yeah.
And so we did that for just about every loss. And the losses aren't just death. It's, relationship loss,
Sure.
friendship. Our house burned down when I was 13. That was a huge loss that we never talked about how I felt about it or how my brother and sister, none of us. So it was a really intense look at all the losses in your life. And there's a point to it, and you get through it, and you're on the other side, and you feel so much better. But I find a lot of clients that I'm helping through this, they look at that, and they're like, I don't know if I can do that.
Yeah.
So that's when I companion the hell out of them.
Well, having gone through it, sounds like, I mean, we talked about this recently with someone, like, having lived through it makes you a better coach.
I agree. And I, even as a clinician, as a therapist, I would only suggest or ask my clients to do things that I had tried myself.
Yeah.
Because I just wanted to be as authentic as I can be.
Right.
I still
Yeah.
try to be genuine and authentic.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the same thing with like eating disorders. Like the best providers have struggled with that themselves because there's unknowable things. You can't just attain that kind of knowing from a book. It has to come from experience, and most of those things come from experience. Most of what you learn, most of the helpful things that you learn come from experience.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very interesting because, I mean, what is as far as I see it, that like graph almost exposes you to loss, grief.
It's very exposing. You're very vulnerable. I give lots of warning, before we jump into it. And the book that we read together explains it really well too. And the point of it. Like there's a point to this. I'm not just torturing you. But yeah, you are very exposed. I think it helps that it's a stranger, like an outsider, not anybody you're related to, or for me, it helped to bear all.
I think a lot of people haven't experienced that relationship that you cultivate with, quote unquote, a stranger, right? Even if it's a therapist or a coach or whoever, there is that dynamic where it's like, whatever I tell them isn't going to actually change my inner circle at all, right? And I think people are sometimes fearful of relying on friends or relying on family because that then means something in everyday life, whereas like a coach or a therapist or a dietitian or whoever, you can go and you can kind of like talk about these things without it feeling so heavy.
Yes. And there really isn't any judgment. And you have to cultivate trust and safety right from the minute you meet them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but to your point, Ryan, I think that makes good sense. Like you can offload all of this stuff to someone and not in like next week you're not going to see him at the birthday party and be like, oh, I remember when he said that thing. Like
Exactly.
yeah, I can certainly understand that. So up till now, you've gone through your grief. You had gone through the professional medical system. You've gone through the professional education system. And what was your kind of aha moment like, now that I've experienced all of this, I think I could help people?
That moment was soon after I finished my grief recovery process. I realized I never actually received any grief training in my master's program. There isn't any special talk about grief at all. And I was like, we're missing. This is a big hole. And I just kept going around saying, why don't we talk about this? It just ignited a fire in me, and then I became a true student of grief. Then I started reading book after book, podcast after podcast, asking anybody and everybody that would listen, which I was probably so annoying, but I just think we need to talk about it. And I became someone who I want to be known as the person who talks about grief, or the person you can tell the craziest thing to. And it's safe and it's comfortable and you can get relief.
why do you, in your own words, describe it as being, our society as being grief illiterate?
I go to that phrase, grief illiterate, a lot, and it's more about the language. I think we don't have a language to talk about our grief, because it's not just sad, it's not just depressed. There's so many layers of feelings that are attached to grief, and some of them are like relief, happy. Some, and I don't mean that to sound cruel. After you watch someone you love struggle for a year, there is some like relief and happiness, like, okay, they're no longer struggling.
Wow.
But yeah, I think the fact that I had to search high and low for help for my family and myself on grief specifically, that made me feel like, wow, we don't know how to do this. We don't know how to do grief.
Do you think that people feel shame in what they feel around grief?
Absolutely. Absolutely. One person that I worked with early on, they admitted to me that they felt relief after their person had died. And they were so ashamed of that. And I was like, me too. And I wouldn't talk to just anybody about that.
Right.
And, for me, it was, I helped my mother, like, I washed her butt. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many deep, intimate, personal things that happen in that kind of death or that kind of illness. And this client that I was working with had the same experience and was too afraid to talk about it with anybody else. And she was ashamed that, like, she was upset about it. And then I think there's so much shame in saying, I still am so sad, or I still miss my person. And a lot of people say the shoulds. I should be further along. I shouldn't feel this way. I always encourage people to stay away from the shoulds.
Yeah.
Because there's no timeline. There really isn't. You could talk about stages. There's a whole... I'll go into that some other time, but every grief is personal. Every loss is personal. So therefore, your grieving is personal.
So I told a couple people that I was going to have you on, and so I started to kind of have my own high level, entry level, beginner level conversations on grief. And I basically posed the question to a couple people, like, what should I ask her?
Yeah.
And I got a couple questions that come from our audience, so to speak, that I'd like you to kind of
Yes.
articulate for me. I guess we'll start with the first one. How often, what is it, how do you handle it, how do you help maybe someone, how would you specifically help someone that is grieving for someone that's still alive? Maybe in this particular example, maybe they have I think they actually have the same diagnosis your mom had, and has already passed the curve, the what's that called, the life expectancy curve, and their significant others is clearly grieving. I mean, I think we all are a little bit because because we love them so much. But
Yeah.
how would you maybe handle that or talk to people about that, or you specifically offer any help?
Yes, I definitely have experience helping people with that. It's called anticipatory grief. It's like being you're in a car, you're about to be in a car accident. It's happening in slow motion. You're watching it. You know what's going to happen. This car is crashing, and it feels like it's moving in slow motion for you the entire time. And usually when I say that or describe that, use that analogy, clients are like, Yes, it does feel like it's in slow motion, and I don't know it because it's like I'm so happy they're still here. I'm so happy I get to help them or experience another day with them, but I know the inevitable is happening. I try to encourage people to allow both, like that joy of still having time with them and the sadness that this person is going to leave us. Both of those can exist. You have to have enough, like, give yourself enough room and space to experience both. And honestly, people just need to be heard. Grief needs to be witnessed, experienced, heard. And so I give people this space. Like, just tell me how you're feeling. Tell me everything. You know, and if you don't have the words, maybe we'll try to find them. But anticipatory grief is a tough one. So grieving somebody that's still alive. So I definitely have experience with that. And I had to come to an acceptance of what this person used to be in my life and accept that they're not going to be that anymore. That is a hard pill to swallow. So it's acceptance of what is. And we can work on that together. And then acceptance of what they are now. So I'll use my mom as an example. So for the first maybe 3 or 4 months after her diagnosis, she was still pretty much herself and was able to move. And she was very independent still. She just couldn't make like smart decisions. Like, so she wasn't able to drive, so I just was her chauffeur for a summer, and that was really fun. And then she started to slowly, like, the tumor started to take over, and so then she wasn't making sense, and it was like she wasn't herself anymore. So it was like we had grieved the person she was, and now we're getting used to the person she is now. And it was a lot of, like, back and forth. Like, I wish she could do this. Oh, but we can still do this. Like, you have to allow both to live or be, both experiences to happen, not shut down either one.
It's so interesting, this idea that grief is this complex, multifaceted emotion and experience, in the sense that, yeah, you don't really look. Actually, I don't even know if they have grief on the, like, an emotion wheel. Like, you don't necessarily find it on a wheel, because maybe it is more of a being. Like, you're grieving, you're experiencing it, but it has all these other emotions associated with it. It's so interesting. Like the relief, yeah, I can totally see that. The peace in one sense, and then maybe the anger in another sense, and then the overwhelming sadness in another sense for a lot of people, and to actually to have the level of emotional awareness. I mean, that's a real skill that you have to work on.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I can totally see the benefit of talking through that and having someone support you in this. But the other idea that is super interesting is it's not even just multifaceted in emotion. It's grief can be experienced as a person in almost any way, like as a person changes, whether that's like their physical ailments progress, or maybe they're just the identity that you once knew for this person has changed. And so do you have experience with that? Like, oh, my spouse has changed over the last decade. You know, I'm grieving what they once were, or I don't know, my mom is now a different person than I remember from childhood, and I'm grieving that. Do you work with people on that? And what kind of advice would you have for someone who sees that and is and maybe wouldn't even call it grief?
Lots of people don't identify that what they're going through, what they're feeling, is grief. Divorce. There's so much grief in divorce. And for just what you just described, here is this person I married and they're not that person anymore, or here's this life I dreamt of and I'm not going to get that, or it's not going to pan out that way. There's so much grief in that that needs to be worked through. But people don't usually identify it. as such. Or what you were describing was reminding me of parents or caregivers of spouses, so a loved one who like have chronic illnesses. So they, for parents, they had this dream of what their child's life would be, and it's not that anymore. So same thing, they have to kind of mourn their dream of what their child's life was going to be, and then accept what it is now. And even the acceptance too is learning that, okay, so your child's life is not going to be, they're not going to play sports, or they're not going to be in mainstream education, but they still can be this beautiful being. They still have a life to live, and what should that life look like now? So it's like this level of acceptance. Here's where we are, and now where can we go? Which is why I like coaching better than therapy, because it's way more focused on where can we go versus what has happened to you.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear in a society where we're always looking to find closure or to fix. Like you haven't said either of those words. Like that's
No.
But me, who doesn't know anything about grief except I hate it, of course, is I'd be looking for the opposite. Or I'd be like, I just figure out how to fix me, or like close this chapter of my life and let me tie up in a bow and throw it away, or do whatever I have to do with it. But that's probably why I'm so not good at it.
Well, that's literally what every new client says to me. Please fix me. Is it ever going to be over? How am I going to get over this? And you don't get over grief. You learn to live with it. You figure out a new way to be. I always say, I'm 47. I could live another 40 years on this planet without my mom. So I need to figure out how I'm going to do that in a happy, healthy way. Because, people believe different things. I believe I will see her someday again. And when I see her, I don't want to be like, oh, look at all the things I could have done and I didn't because I was sad or fearful or mad. I let my grief ruin the possibility of what I could be as a person. Like, I want to be like, look at all these people I helped. Look at how much of a difference I made. And that literally gets me out of bed every day.
That's incredibly powerful, that statement you just made. I feel like there's a lot of people out there that if they change their way of thinking to that, it might be something that could spark them.
I hope so.
So, next question.
Yeah.
I have a friend that lost a loved one 12 years ago, and when I asked her about a question that I might ask you, she said, she felt as though she couldn't go and find grief counseling because she was too far removed from the original incident, and that she should let other people use your skills that maybe needed them more. What would you say to someone like that?
I love this question. I honestly love helping people that are 12 years, 20 years out, because I can kind of shed light on things that they either have buried or didn't even realize was grief, or didn't even know they had to address or could address. Those are your friend that's 12 years out. That is like my favorite client. Because I think what people don't realize is, so you have one loss and you don't deal with it. Then you have another loss and you don't really deal with it. So they compile on top of each other, and then there's like this really big loss, and all the feelings that you didn't feel from all the other losses come rising to the surface, and you're like, oh my God, what am I going to do? What do I do with all this grief energy? That's what I call it. It's energy. It needs a place. So I would encourage that person to absolutely use my services. There's so much to dig into. And kind of like that loss history graph that I was describing, I would do something like that with that person, because there's probably the 12 years between, there's probably been micro losses that they've had too that could contribute to how they feel currently. And they just don't. I just like really like uncovering these things or helping people uncover them for themselves. And sometimes I'm just a flashlight.
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool.
What does it mean when you say, or someone else says, I didn't deal with it? Right? Like, what does that actually look like? Because there are people who've mentioned to me, like, this person close to me, passed away, and I just kind of moved on,
Yes.
and they didn't necessarily feel like explicit, heavy emotion during that time, and grief didn't look like you would imagine it to look like in movies or whatever. So what does that mean to just not deal with grief?
There's so many things that people do to not deal with grief. We go shopping. I have this running joke that just so many examples in my life of people who they lose somebody and they go and buy a new car. I have like this list of people. But we distract ourselves, basically, is what I'm saying. Avoidance.
Drugs and alcohol.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Anything not to feel what we're actually feeling. And the distraction, like jumping into work. So becoming, completely focused on work, completely focused on helping someone else, or, the kids, the husband, the parent. I did all of these things, by the way. No judgment here. In the grief recovery method, they're called STIRBs. Of course, now I don't know that's an acronym. Oh my God, what does it mean?
It's okay.
I can't remember.
It'll come to you.
It's the lights.
We'll put it up there.
Yes,
STIRBs.
STIRBs, STERBS. But
Okay.
basically all the things that we do to avoid.
Yeah.
Like running. What about people that run?
Oh yeah, they're healthy. They're healthy ones. Yeah, I don't know if you're speaking from experience or not.
I actually meant running away. I meant
I meant like running a
no,
marathon.
no, God, no. I'm. I mean, of course, that's for somebody else. I meant like running away, like literally, like getting on a plane and being like, I'm going to run away.
Oh yeah, people do that. Yeah, yeah. Move to a different state.
Like, I hear people that are like, oh, they can't live in this house anymore. There's too many this or there's too much of that.
Yes.
Like,
My father did that. Yeah, right before my mother got diagnosed, they had purchased a retirement home in Florida. So they were down in Florida getting that home ready when my mother's symptoms really started to show, like in a dangerous way. And so that's actually where she got the news that she had a brain tumor. And so he moved. My father moved to Florida right away. And I don't think he didn't overtly say I need to go. I think it just naturally was like, I got to get out of here. And now when he comes back, I think when he comes to Massachusetts, I think it's hard. It's like all these reminders. But in Florida, there's not a lot of reminders. People run all the time. I think eventually it catches up to you, though.
oh, I have to imagine. Right?
Physically,
Well,
mentally, emotionally, you start lashing out at people. You get sick.
Well, they say everywhere you go, there you are.
Yes.
I feel like that's
Yes.
yeah.
The idea that people cope in ways that they're not actually attuned to is very interesting, and you can even recognize yourself doing these kinds of things. If you're feeling, if you can notice yourself isolating before you even notice yourself sad, for example, right?
Definitely.
And I find that to be entirely compelling. I mean, maybe one, because it's of the work that I do. People often engage in eating disorder behaviors as a way to cope. It's maladaptive, meaning that you kind of fall into it almost, and it's not great for you. And you kind of mentioned this too with your uncle passing, that alcohol kind of came up. And obviously, I don't know if this is actually what happened, but I guess it probably is likely that alcohol just randomly popped up. I don't necessarily know if you were saying, well, I'm feeling so down and sad, I'm going to actually drink tonight. Although that might have been the actual drive. It may not have been entirely conscious. But can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, it was absolutely conscious.
Oh, it was, yeah.
I so vividly remember, like the after thing was at our house, and I was sitting all alone, and I was like, I don't like the way I feel. I hate the way I feel. I hate the way everybody else is acting. Like, I need to not feel this way.
Wow.
And literally it was like food and alcohol. Yeah. But I know that for many people it's unconscious. I mean, obviously there were some other, well, maybe it's not obvious. I know now that there were lots of other things going on for me that made alcohol sound like a really good idea.
So you mentioned that a lot of times the people that you start to work with, it's not them that come to you and say, hey, I feel this way. It's someone in their life that says, hey, you should meet with this person. Or, I probably just did it twice, right? I'm like, I think there's some people that you should talk to. What would you say, like, how would we introduce you to somebody? How would we, what would you say that you can offer them? Like, kind of give everybody like the how I help people statement, if you could.
When I get the question of, or the statement of, oh, my aunt could use you, oh, my neighbor could use help from you, I encourage people to say, I know this person, Julie, she's a grief coach, she's not a therapist. Coaching is a little bit gentler. Really, she's just a really good listener, and it's a space to talk about anything that you're feeling. But yeah, so I do one-on-one counseling. It's hard to get rid of that. Coaching. And I have an office, or I'll do it virtually, whichever the person prefers. I do that grief recovery method, that 8-week process, but that's not the only thing I offer, but that's a foundation. And there are times I offer it to people and they're like, no, I'm not ready for that. And that's fine. And so then that's more of me holding space for people to really work out what they're stuck on. Because they usually think they're stuck. I'm so stuck on, my sadness, my anger, my not knowing how to move on. And then I also do group work as well. Like, I do workshops. I do grief workshop series. And so each week we tackle something different about grief. For instance, I'm starting a grief series at one of the peer recovery centers, A Way of Life in Weymouth. And it's focused on the grief in recovery. So the grief around stopping drinking, stopping drugging, and diving into, like, you lost you could see it as you lost your best friend in drinking or drugging, or the one thing that was working in your life. Or so there's series that I do like that. So some people are like, oh, I'm not a group person, I need to do individual, and that's totally fine. And then other way around, their mother made them come see me, and they don't like being the only one in the room, and they'd rather do the group. So it always begins with a conversation of, like, what is going to work? What do you think will work for you? What's most comfortable? Like, individual, group, with this book or not? And so, yeah, so when people come and say, oh, I wish my neighbor would come see you, I give them a script. Say, this is how you should describe me, and what I could help them with. And I find that works. I don't know if I've answered your question.
No, I think so.
Yeah.
I think, I think so. I think our audience will, we're going to put all of your information down on the bottom so they can find you, no problem. But I think our audience can understand that. And I think that for me, having just learned about you, it's again back to what we said earlier in the middle, like knowing that you went through something and that sparked your passion, and then you became truly passionate. For me, I know this is my own in my own individual opinion, but like having a degree in something means that you are, or at least interested in it at one point. It doesn't mean you're passionate about it, but like truly finding a passion and learning on your own is way more valuable to me than anything else. So thank you for that. And
I'm very open too with my story. I mean, it's on my website. I usually explain that story, about my mom or my illness right from the get-go.
what is your website so we can put that down? God, you paying attention?
God, do you hear me? It's anewpathcoaching.com. anewpathcoaching.com.
Awesome.
Nice. I do have one or two questions before we wrap up, though, mostly because I'm curious, and hopefully it's helpful to people. But if someone had just experienced a loss recently and they're in the thick of grief, what would you suggest?
So that question, that happens a lot where people are really, it's very new. The loss is very new. That I go very gently with and I go usually I start with the 6 needs of the grieving. So it's your grief needs to be witnessed. Of course, now I'm on the spot and I can't remember. But it's like these very specific needs that people don't realize they need because they're so early in it. And I do a lot more like educational things, like understand how grief is affecting your body. I talk about grief brain because they're coming to me like, I can't even get out of bed, or I feel like I can't pay my bills, or I can't go to work. My body just won't let me do it. So I give them education to basically say like, you're normal. This is normal. This is a normal reaction to loss. This is how you're grieving. I would not recommend like the grief recovery method for somebody who's like in the first 6 months. And so basically it's just, I'm a listening ear. I'm a safe place. And then also I find a lot of times when people do come to me early on, they can say, well, okay, Mom, I did what you asked me to do, or okay, husband, I'm doing something about my grief. So many times my clients say, oh, I can't wait to tell my spouse what we worked on today, or my mom will be so happy that we talked about this, and a lot of times they say, oh, I don't want to burden my friends. I feel like all I talk about is, my person that I miss, or I feel like when I go hang out with my friends, I'm doom and gloom. So I don't say it. So then they're not talking about it at all. So I'm that person. I'm that place they can go to let that stuff out. So I do a lot of teaching during that like early period.
Does that ever go, the point on like, I don't want to be that person, does that ever go on too long? Like, does someone, I mean, I can almost imagine people in my head now, but are some people too identified with their grief?
I guess that's an opinion, and I bet loved ones are the first to have those kinds of opinions because they know you the best. I know how the DSM-5 feels about that,
Really?
the diagnosing methods for clinical.
What would they call that?
Prolonged grief. As if it's that sounds negative to me.
Sure, yeah.
As if there's something wrong with you that you need to fix. Another reason I don't want to be in that realm. I think it's perfectly normal, and I don't think there should be any timeline on it at all.
Wow. Yeah, that is good to know. It's good for people to know, good for me to know, good for everyone, because there are people who seem to grieve, a loved one for years and years and years, and it does become the, kind of like a, maybe a centerpiece of their reality, and maybe that's how they have learned how to grieve.
Yeah, and I think people in that category need different things. Like, they need to learn how to give themselves permission to have fun without their loved one, or create a different life without that person. Yeah, like if it's been 15, 20 years and it's still the centerpiece. I mean, again, I don't like to put people in categories, but parents who have lost children, I think that's a whole other level of pain and suffering. Like, this is just my opinion.
Sure.
That's a hard one.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And I think that's the one that comes to my mind when you were saying, you know, somebody who's 20 years later, it's still like the centerpiece of their life.
Yeah, definitely.
It's easy to see how you can identify as that. Like, that's who I am now. I'm someone who lost a child.
Yes.
Like, and that's, I mean, we all struggle with who we identify as, but
Yes.
identifying that has got to be very challenging in your own headspace for a long time.
And great point, because that's what I try to help them around. That's what we work on. Like, you're not just someone who lost your child. You are so many other things, and you have the right to be so many other things. That's sort of what we work on.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, great. Do you have any other like valuable input to someone who is grieving any one of these multifaceted areas of grief?
Yeah, I think grief is a community event. I recently heard that at I joined a end of life doula guild. That's a lot of words. And somebody.
What's a guild? Do you know what a guild is?
It's like an association of people who, you know, do the same, are in the same field. It can be like professional development. It can be, you know, they can be created to maybe pass legislation for their industry.
I want to join a guild.
Yeah.
I was so excited to be asked to join this guild. I was just last week. I just joined.
Nice. Cool.
An end-of-life doula is something I probably will move towards in a few years, but I just want to keep coaching people. So there was somebody there that said, grief is a community event. It affects everyone, and we don't talk about it. So I guess my overall message is, don't be afraid to talk about grief. And if you find, you know, your friends don't want to talk about it, your family doesn't want to talk about it, come talk to me about it. Or find another. There are other grief recovery specialists. I'm also in the middle of a grief educator certification, and that's with David Kessler, who is such a grief guru. He's this sweet, gentle man. He's written many books. And he's a great educator as well on all things grief. So, my biggest takeaway is, don't grieve alone. You don't have to isolate. You don't have to do this alone.
I love it. Well, do you have any other thoughts?
No, I think on that note, I feel like, I think is there anything else you want to share?
No, I just want to say thank you for having me. And anywhere I go, and I always say, oh, nobody's going to want to talk to me because I'm like the grief lady. So if anybody is open to talking about grief, I get very excited.
I learned a lot today.
Good.
And I'm grateful that you're here, and I'm
Good.
grateful for the work that you do.
Thank you.
I like your approach. It's the first time I've ever experienced someone that intentionally puts themselves in a spot where they can hold space for someone who's grieving. You know, we talk about holding space for all sorts of challenges and things in our lives, but you know, for such a multi-layered, multifaceted challenge. So thank you for the work that you do.
Yeah, thank you for letting me talk about it.
You're welcome. And so for those of you that are out there, you can find us on, most of our listeners are on Spotify now. So
YouTube too. We got some
YouTube and Spotify. If you have any questions or comments, please drop them in the comment section. Like, subscribe, do all the things that the young people do. And if you have any topics that you find interesting or people that you'd like us to talk to, please don't hesitate to shout those out to us as well. And we'll catch you next time.